Share this real fast before I get into the lesson. I had an opportunity today to share Christ with a guy that is a professing atheist, and I didn't lead him to the Lord, and I've talked to him on several occasions. But today he did something very unique. He said, I get it. He said, I really get what you're saying, and he said, I really do understand that there's something bigger than I can ever imagine out there. I know that doesn't sound like much to a lot of people, but I'm going to tell you, I've talked to this man a lot, and that's the first time I've heard him say that. And I could tell he's mulling it around some. I get an opportunity to see him quite often. So just pray for me that I'll have the right words. When I'm around this guy, that I have the right words to say. I don't want to beat him up, but at the same time, I don't want that guy to die without Christ. And he's a friend of mine. I love him, care for him. And just keep me in prayer as I minister to him. All right? We've already started talking about some of the gifts. Tonight, the gift I want to talk about, we'll probably talk about more than one, but I want to begin with the gift of giving. All right? We've already talked about the encouraging and the exhortation and all that kind of thing. Barnabas, son of consolation, we talked about that. Tonight, the first gift that I want to talk about tonight is the gift of giving. The gift of giving is a really unique gift. Well, I don't know that it's unique so much as it is very common, yet the way when you have the actual gift of giving, how different that it really is. More than we realize. Because let's face it, as Christians, we all have an obligation to give. We give our tithes and offerings. We give, benevolently. We give in a lot of different ways. We're told to give sacrificially. We're told, to give cheerfully. We're told in Scripture to give in a lot of different fashions. The Church of Corinth was giving very generously in their gifts to Jerusalem. And so we're instructed to give in a lot of different ways. So all of us have the responsibility of giving. So what makes the gift of giving so uniquely different? And here's the thing that I kind of want you to see in this. Now, by the way, the gift of giving is what we would probably call a service gift. All right? It's a service gift. It's a gift that God gives in order to perform a particular service to the people that we would deal with. And so in the idea of having a gift of giving, it is a little different than just being told to give or being commanded to give. Someone who genuinely has the gift of giving is someone who will naturally give sacrificially. They see needs that not everybody else sees. They don't need prompting. They don't need urging. They look for opportunities. It's as though they see opportunities that nobody else sees. They're the type of people that do not need to have accolades. They don't need, quite frankly, most of the time it's something they do anonymously, and that kind of thing. Because what they do is they genuinely are looking for opportunities to give. And by the way, these are people that do not give out of their abundance. They are people that tend to give whether they really have it or not. They're people that will find a way to have the means to give. And by the way, it's not always money, but my point is they find the means to give regardless of anything else. And they are so willing to sacrifice their own needs for the purpose of having to give to others. And those that have this gift will naturally do that. Just to give you a point of reference, Romans chapter 12:6 talks about gifts. And he says, having then gifts differing according to the grace that is given to us, whether prophecy, let us prophesy according to the proportion of faith, and then so on down the line. Down in verse 8, he says, he that giveth, let him do it with simplicity. By the way, that word simplicity is this. A person who has that gift is going to give in a very basic manner. I mean, they look for an opportunity to give. They look for specific needs that they can fill. They look for people that are hurting, struggling, and it's just something that just comes natural to them, and they're going to help supply that need. They don't get all elaborate about it. They don't get all crazy about it. they just give. And it's just it becomes their gift. It is what God has given them to help them to see what not all of us can see. They seem to be able to see people's needs when others don't see people's needs. And it's kind of neat because people with this gift tend to have a lot of wisdom. And the reason they have wisdom is God has given them a special wisdom and a special understanding to see those needs. Wisdom and an understanding about people's lives and they just see things that they recognize that not everyone is looking for, not everyone sees. And so they just naturally do those kinds of things. It's just something they can't not do because they have the wisdom of knowing that, listen, this person has a genuine need. Though nobody else seems to see it, I see it. All right? And so those people with this kind of gift will do that. It's not necessary that they have a lot of wealth. In fact, you see in Scripture some places Mary that brought the expensive ointment to Jesus' feet. It was the most expensive thing she had in all likelihood. And she brought this expensive ointment and she washed his feet with it. It was one of those things where the cost of this ointment meant nothing to her. It was not important. It was that she had it available. There was a need, and she just used it. She just did it. She was criticized by the apostles, but she just did it because she understood the necessity in certain things, and Jesus backed her up on that. The woman that he talks about having the 2 mites, that was all she had. She would in all likelihood get put into this category. She goes to the temple, they're putting in their tithes and such, and she puts in every single dime she's got, literally. And Jesus makes it clear, listen, you guys probably think she didn't give very much, but I'm here to tell you she gave everything she had. So this idea of having that gift of giving is one of those things that it doesn't always involve a lot. It just involves the willingness, the desire, the wisdom and understanding of knowing when to give of themselves or give of what they have to meet those needs. Let me give you another Bible example. In Acts chapter 9, verse 36. Acts chapter 9, picking up in verse 36, kind of an interesting wording on this. He says in chapter 9, verse 36, talking about a lady that was there. And she goes by 2 names. I've often thought this was kind of interesting. She goes by Tabitha and she goes by Dorcas. And you think, well, why did she go by 2 names? Well, the first assumption is that she was probably renamed because it meant something different. But do you guys know what Tabitha means? It means gazelle, all right? Doesn't really mean much to me, but I'm just saying her name meant gazelle. Do you know what Dorcas means? Gazelle. Okay. So it just seems odd to me that, why bother going by 2 different names if they both mean the same thing? You would think that she'd go by a different name because there was some significance between them. But in all reality, both names meant the same thing. They were just basically in a different language. And so that's the deal. But in any case, he tells us this. He says, I lost my place. Acts 9:36. Now, there was at Joppa a certain disciple named Tabitha, which by interpretation is called Dorcas. So we see by interpretation. So by one language, Tabitha, the other language, Dorcas, they both meant the same thing. This woman was full of good works and alms deeds, which she did. Alms deeds are essentially charitable gifts. She was known for her giving. She was known for her generous heart. She was known for doing good works, and she was known for her generous heart, her generous giving. Wouldn't it be neat, when you're talking about someone remembering who you are, thinking about who you are, and whatever your particular gift is. In her case, it was this gift of giving. Wouldn't it be great that that's the way people remembered you? This person, this is who they are. This is what they did. This is their legacy. And that's the case with her. It became her legacy. She's known for her good works and for her giving. And so she apparently had the gift of giving because she was recognized and known for her alms deeds. All right? Another example, we're going to go right back to Barnabas again. I got to tell you, Barnabas is filled with gifts, but nonetheless, Acts 4:36, and Joseph, who's who by the apostles was surnamed Barnabas, which is being interpreted the son of consolation. We already talked about that. A Levite of the country of Cyprus. Listen to this. Having land, sold it, brought the money, and laid it at the apostles' feet. So here's a guy who, I don't know how wealthy he was, but he was wealthy enough that he owned property. All right? So he decided, listen, the church has greater needs than I have in my own life. So what I'm going to do is sell everything I got and bring it to the church. And so that's what he did. He sold his land, sold it all, brought it to the apostles, said, hey, listen, use this however you feel you deem fit, and I'll find a way to make a living. I'll go about doing whatever I need to do. That's such an incredible thing. And he was willing to do just that. Now, there are always those that try to pretend to do that. We know the story of Ananias and Sapphira. For those of you that don't, basically they did the same thing, but when they got there, they got to thinking about it, decided they wanted to keep part of it, and so they lied to the church and said they was giving the church all their money, and they lied, and God struck them dead right at the altar. And the interesting thing is they were told, listen, you didn't have to give it to the church. That's a choice. Don't lie and say you did and then didn't. You could have said, listen, we sold all of our property, kept out $10,000 to live on, and gave the rest to the church. That would have been perfectly acceptable. But they said, we gave it all to the church. You see, here's a dilemma. There are folks who try to pretend as though they're great givers when actually they miss a lot of the things that a person who truly has the gift of giving will exercise in their life. All right? You never hear Barnabas talking about that. You never hear it mentioned. Just he did it, moved on with his life. All right? So that's the picture. Now, some of the things that stand out about those who have this gift, and it's interesting because there are some things that stand out. It's kind of funny about them. But number one is they're incredibly sensitive to the needs of others, and they're the quickest to begin looking for opportunities to help them. They're really sensitive to that. I got to be real honest with you. I know myself. I know I'm one of these guys. If you have a need, and I know you have a need, and I know what that need is, I'll be one of the first to help you. But I am dumber than rocks about recognizing you have a need, about recognizing what that need is, and then just jumping up and doing it without anybody knowing about it. I need a prompt. I need help. It's not that I don't have a giving heart, and I think all of those that know Christ, believers in Jesus Christ, ought to have a giving heart, but I don't have the gift of giving. Because in all honesty, though I am very willing to give, and I will sacrificially give, I've watched my wife sell things that she has for the purpose of giving to others. I've seen it happen many, many times, but I'll tell you this, neither one of us just know. You know, we're giving people, but we don't have the gift of giving. All right, does that make sense? Because that person with that gift of giving is going to be very sensitive to the needs, you know. And so you see things that not everybody else sees. Not only that, but people with the gift of giving tend to be very good stewards who are looking for a way to distribute God's wealth. And it's interesting because here's what they want. If you had these people misplaced in your church, let's say you put them on the finance team. You think somebody with the gift of giving might be good with finances? Absolutely not. Because here's what they become. They're going to be misers with everything that does not go along with giving. Which means if you need church repairs, well, we can make it last. We can make it do. Let's not do this. Let's hold on to that money because there might be somebody we can help with that. We might have a missionary we need to support. And you know what? It's not that those things are bad. Those things are all good. But other things are necessary too. But you can usually see it even in their own life, because even in their own life with their own money, they very often will deprive themselves, and they will do without things. And the reason they do that is because they want to make sure they have money to give. They want to make sure they have the means to give when the means are there. So people with a gift of giving are first very sensitive to the needs of others, but are also, I say good stewards, but even to a greater degree than that. They will do without for fear that they won't have to use to help others. Not only that, but they typically do not like attention to their be brought to their giving. And they can be very outspoken in regard to the concerns for those that are in need, whether it's a missionary or whether it's somebody in the church hurting. They're not the kind of people that want to draw attention to themselves in their own giving, but they'll be the people that are very vocal and say, why aren't you helping these people? Because they have this gift of giving very often, and by the way, this is true about every gift. Sometimes if we have that gift, especially gifts of service, if we have that gift, we sometimes think everybody else should too. Because, we see it, if I were to have that gift, I would see it and wonder why others can't see it. And they'll get frustrated, by the way, very often because they wonder why others aren't jumping up or why others aren't doing this or doing that. And it's not fair. Not everybody has that gift. They can see and know things that, in all honesty, you might even know that someone has a need but not really know how to help them. You might see someone that you feel like probably needs groceries. And so you give them a gift card without recognizing perhaps that they don't have transportation, or without recognizing that perhaps they don't have the means to cook those items, or whatever the case may be. And your heart is in the right place, and it's really good to do those things. But my point being, someone with the gift of giving, I'm going to tell you now, somehow miraculously knows exactly what they need to do. Knows what to give, how to give it, how to present it. They just seem to know. And it's an amazing thing at how that can work. All right? But they very often will think that others ought to be able to see what they can see. All right? They'll sometimes be pretty controlling also with the money in order to have it available for the giving, as I talked about in their own personal lives. But they also like to see that in the church, and it frustrates them. It will frustrate them. It's almost like it's, what's the word? An oxymoron, is that the right word? Where they think, number one, they don't want you to have a big bank account because we should have been using that to put toward the missionaries and put toward people in need. But at the same time, they don't want you to spend the money on anything except helping the missionaries and helping the people in need. So it's almost like you can't save up the money to help, but at the same time, you have to make sure you put up the money to help. And so it almost works against itself, but that's kind of the mentality, because they're so focused on making sure that needs are met. And I'm talking about physical needs typically. The physical needs are met, that they do that with no regard to anything else. All right? So that can happen. And so, putting them in those positions, by the way, is not a good idea. Some of the things that can be misunderstanding about them, too, is some might see them as being incredibly controlling with the money and with church money. And they'll even get frustrated sometimes at some of the things you do. And in addition to that, and so they wind up sometimes getting a bad rap because people think, well, they just oppose things. Well, not really. They just oppose those things that don't fit into their category of the gift. And so sometimes they're very misunderstood. And it also makes them appear sometimes as if they're like cheapskates. They don't want to spend money on anything, Not only that, but sometimes, and this is a strange one, but sometimes they don't fit in with everybody because sometimes the clothes are outdated. Sometimes they won't go out and do the things you do. If you ask them out and want them to go out with you, and they don't really want to spend the money eating out, because to them that would be frivolous. And so they have a characteristic about them that sometimes make them look as though or act as though they don't care, when in reality it's just the opposite. It's because they genuinely care, because they are willing to sacrifice their own means and their own goods to make sure that they can be there when it comes time to help somebody. Because the last thing somebody who has the gift of giving wants to do is not be able to help when it comes time to help. It's a frustrating thing for them. So they can be really misunderstood. And some people, if you find out that they're that type of person, that they're always doing that, Another misunderstanding is sometimes people get the idea they're just trying to impress people or to buy their relationships. People that don't know any better will think things like that if they find out that you are very much of a giver in that regard. Sometimes I think, yeah, you're just trying to butter them up, or you're just trying to, and it's just not so in the case of those who truly have this gift. One area where Satan, or some areas where Satan can attack, is an easy attack by those around them is that they might see them as though they're secretly trying to buy someone's attention. Satan will fill people's hearts and minds with that. Another attack is they can sometimes themselves be critical of those that don't see the needs as they see the needs, and Satan will kind of get them upset, and oftentimes it'll upset them to the point where it can cause them to leave a church. It can drive them away from the church because, they feel like the church is uncaring or the church isn't where they need to be. Well, not everybody in the church has the same gift you have. And if you have that gift of giving, there's going to be very few people see things like you see things in that regard. All right? And so sometimes if they're not careful, they'll let Satan attack their minds and such in that where they feel like they're the only ones that really see these needs and the church really doesn't care. All right? One last thing. Well, one last thing. I've already mentioned it, but one last thing is they can tend to get upset with church decisions. If you decided you were going to build, or you decided you were going to spend money on the building, carpet, whatever the case may be, that's a tough one for them. Because, unless it's extremely bad, we can make do with that. Let's take that money and put it toward, say, the missionaries or something to meet their needs. That's their mentality. It's not that that's a bad mentality. That's who they are. That's their gift. And so they're always going to see things from a little different light. And obviously, some of the areas of service that they would be good at would be things like the mission team, or caregiving ministries, food pantry, clothing ministries, all those kinds of nursing home, all those kinds of ministries would be really good for them. With one exception, you want to be careful not to put them in a place where they're say in charge of your benevolent funds, because they'll give it to everybody. They just have a giving heart. All right. Any questions about the gift of giving, or a comment or a thought? Yes, sir.
I do have a question.
Mm-hmm.
But people with the gift of giving, are they going to be where they're not easily duped into somebody using them?
Surprisingly enough, yeah. Now, it's not to say they can't be duped, and they have to be really careful to be confident and know God's, giving them that. But as I mentioned earlier, they seem to have an uncanny wisdom about them. I'm not going to mention a name here, but there's an individual that I love and appreciate. And I know that because I know how they've treated my family. And I know for a fact no one knows. I just am confident. And I know their heart, and I also have seen how they've dealt, because they've come to me and asked me in private about different people's family situations or whatever, so that they can help them in some way, form, or fashion. So it's a person that I feel incredibly confident has this gift. And the thing that I have to watch is they can be duped. If you have the gift of giving, there is a wisdom, and I call it a service ministry because it is not a leadership ministry. And so they have this, if they're really exercising their gift, they have a wisdom and an understanding to where they are willing to seek the leadership and to sit down with the leadership to make sure that these are legitimate things. People with a gift of giving aren't stupid, and they're not naive if they truly have the gift. The problem is they can have the gift and not really exercise it properly, and that's one of the misunderstandings, or that's where Satan can attack, is they can be naive if they allow themselves to be. So someone with truly has a gift will typically search out their leadership, search out and sit down and make sure they have a good wisdom and good understanding about those things typically. And I know this individual I'm talking about is just that type of individual. I'll give you an example. Those who think they have a gift of giving, and you usually fall prey. Those who wannabes, I guess we would call it, wannabes, tend to be frivolous in their giving and naive. Because what happens is if somebody really comes along, they think they need to help them, they'll come to them, hey, you just have no idea how bad I need $2,000, you know. Oh, you know what, I think I can help you. You know, and it's like, oh, dude, you should have sat down with me first. I know things you don't know. And that's the problem with thinking you have gifts when you don't have those gifts. Someone that truly has that gift of giving, it's accompanied by an understanding and a wisdom and a willingness to follow leadership. All right? Did I make that clear? I mean, that makes sense to everybody? Any other questions about the gift of giving? All right. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. You're fixing your hair. I thought you was asking a question. All right. Yeah, go ahead. You know, if they are following God's leadership, they're very good not to worry about such things. It doesn't matter to them what other people are doing. They're focused. But one of the problems they can have is one of the attacks they can have. If Satan attacks them, one of the things they can do is and this is where you usually see them get upset, is if they get kind of out of God's will to that degree, is they tend to get upset with others for not doing and not seeing what they do. So it becomes, please? Oh, I'm sorry. The question was basically, do they tend to get upset about others not?
They're so willing to give, and then they sit there and say, there's such a need, but those people don't give.
Yeah, get frustrated about other people not giving like they give. Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't realize you didn't hear the question. Yeah. But yeah, the question is, do they tend to get frustrated by other people not giving like they give? And the answer is pretty simple. It depends on whether or not they stay within the will of God where they need to be. Because those that are within the will of God, honestly, tend not to worry about what everybody else is doing. But one of the first things that can happen to them is when they start to get a little off track, the first thing they start doing is saying, why isn't everybody else seeing and doing what I'm doing? Why aren't other people giving like they ought to be giving? And then that's where they start falling out. And that's one of the dangers. When you have that gift, that's one of the dangers you have to watch out for. All right? Good questions. Anyone else before I move on? All right. The next one, we're going to stay right there in Romans chapter 12 for a second. The second one is the gift of leadership, or we might even call that the gift of administration. All right, both of these kind of go hand in hand. There are some differences, but there's more similarities and differences, so we're just going to lump them together. And this is the idea of a believer with this gift has an incredible ability to discern God's purpose for leadership roles within a group. It could be a group setting. It could be a larger setting, such as a church setting. Whatever the case may be, any kind of church leadership position. And they're very effective at delegation. You know, things they know that they don't have the ability to do. They're very effective at finding and locating the people that are and appointing them to that and encouraging them in that. And so, you know, and they do so in a unique way. If they have this true gift of leadership, they're able to do this in a way that's not manipulative, I guess would be a good word, where you don't feel like you've been pushed into the job, but they make you feel like, you know, they just have that uncanny ability to make you feel like you were really needed there and that that's the position you need to be in, and make you feel good about it. So a person that has this gift of leadership or administration is able to do that. Romans chapter 12, I'm going to give you two passages actually, but they're very much the same. Romans chapter 12, in that list of some gifts that he's giving, he talks about he that ruleth with diligence. All right? That word diligence has to do with the idea that stick-to-itiveness, that really working hard, fervent spirit, that doing it and being committed to it. And so he that ruleth would be someone who would have that gift of leadership. Over in 1 Corinthians chapter 12, we see another illustration of this. Another word is used, but same thing. 1 Corinthians chapter 12, jump down to verse 28. And God hath set some in the church, first apostles, secondary prophets, thirdly teachers, after that miracles, then the gifts of healings, helps, governments, and diversities of tongues. Governments is leadership roles, all right? Those who God appoints to be in positions of leadership. And so when we're looking at these pictures, I'm going to give you an Old Testament illustration of someone now, and I'm going to say that his life is a great picture of a leadership ability. Now, I believe God gifted him in this. This is prior to the church, obviously, prior to the gifts that he handed out to the church. So we're going to talk about Nehemiah for a second in Nehemiah chapter 1. We're going to talk about Nehemiah for a second, but Nehemiah was Old Testament, but it was evident that God instilled within him the abilities, the gift to do this work that he had called him to do. So Nehemiah in chapter 1 and verse 4 says, "And it came to pass when I heard these words," the words that we're talking about is the words about Jerusalem was all tore up and the wall was tore down, and he's the only one really in a position that can do anything about it, "that I sat down and wept and mourned certain days and fasted and prayed before the God of heaven." Now, upon finding this counsel from God, getting this counsel from God, he immediately gets permission from Artaxerxes to go and resolve the problem. Here's something that I think is interesting. This is a true picture of a leader. As soon as he hears and knows there's a problem, we don't see him doing anything else. His focus is immediately on the problem. Immediately upon hearing this, Nehemiah takes it to God, seeks counsel from God, prays and weeps. He's burdened about it. Immediately, a true leader is going to take on that responsibility in his heart that God would have him to lead and to do this. Nehemiah knew from the beginning this was not something he could accomplish. He knew it would require lots and lots of people. And he also knew that there's somebody, what they needed. Jesus describes Israel as sheep scattered without a shepherd. So he immediately understands these people are just going to be sheep scattered about if they don't have leadership role. God had given him the ability to have that leadership role so that when they went back to Jerusalem, something could be done. But he began with counsel of God. People who truly have this gift of leadership understand this more than anybody else, that they can do nothing without Jesus Christ. They get it. It's one of those things where immediately it's like, God, if this is what I'm to do, then you're going to have to do it through me. Moses is a good example of that. But Nehemiah is an example of that. It's interesting. How many people did it take to replace Moses? When Moses stepped down from doing all the things, he had to appoint people to do the job he was doing. You remember how many people? I'm hoping somebody knows the exact number because I'm going to give you an approximate. 70 people. 70 to replace him. All right? So the work he did, in order to divide it up among the people, he had to find 70 people to do his job. All right? Why? Because he was a leader. All right? Nehemiah was a leader. And you'll see that if you study the book of Nehemiah, you can see it all the way through there. And so what he does is he then goes to Jerusalem and he analyzes the problem, chapter 2, verses 9 through 20. He walks around, looks at what all's done. So number 1, goes to God for counseling. Number 2, looks at the problem, analyzes it, and determines what he needs to do. All right? And then number 3, we see that he then begins to organize the people, take charge, and rebuild the wall. He says, okay, here's what we're going to do. This group's going to build this section of wall. This group's going to build that section, so on down the line. All right? And so this is what a leader does. Nehemiah is a perfect example of a leader. He does so by assigning the various groups and various projects to people. All right? He assigns all of that. He says, you're in charge of this. You're in charge of that. And so the job gets done, but ultimately he was always overseeing everything that was happening. All right? Took it to God, analyzed the problem, and then immediately gets to work at putting it all together. That's a leader. And that's the gift that God gives some people. And some people can do that, and some people can't. And even those with that gift can do better with it than others. I'm going to say something that I don't know if you'll agree with this or not, but I'm going to say it. to the degree of your gift, say a pastor, for example, I do have this gift. Do I have it to the degree of someone he can trust with a church of, say, 500 or 1,000? No. Do I have this gift to the degree of somebody that can be trusted with a church of 10,000? No. All right? There is faith with measure. And understand that what that's dealing with is you have a gift within a measure. And God will confine you to that measure. And I'm not using that as an excuse. I'm just saying that we have to understand where our weaknesses are as well as our strengths. All right? And so when we look at this picture, here is an individual who had the ability and had the gift to lead a nation to rebuild this wall. All right? Not only that, but this individual is going to be able to see the strengths of others and have the ability to place them in places where they can serve best. That's one fault that churches have quite often, is not having the ability to put people in places where they can best serve. And sometimes we have to make do with what we have, and that's the way that works. But a leader sees people and sees their abilities and has the ability to place them where they can best serve. And it's important for a leader to always be examining people, not in a judgmental way, not in a critical fashion, but looking at them from the eyes of God to determine where can this person best serve God, and to try to lead those people into those positions. But that's a leadership role. This individual likes to create places of service as well, based upon the strengths of people they have. You know, sometimes people will say, why don't we have this ministry? Why don't we have this ministry? And why don't we have that ministry? And, well, sometimes it's because we really don't have the people to do them. Well, we got all kinds of people that would get involved. Yeah, but we don't have the people that needs to lead them. And as those leaders come about, as you see those leaders come about, then you try to develop those ministries with those leaders. Let me tell you some problems that come with that, and this is one of the frustrations of a leader, is when you find someone that's very capable and very apt to be able to do that and they refuse to do it. That's frustrating. When you find someone that's very capable and very apt and they get involved in it and then they quit, that's frustrating, because now you have a ministry that you can't dissolve and you have to find someone to fit into it, and then what you wind up doing is putting people into it that are not good leaders. And that's frustrating. Probably the most frustrating, by the way. I can't tell you the amount of ministries that we began, and I'm excited about them, felt like we had the perfect person, and next thing you know, that person becomes unfaithful or steps down, and the people that step up are not like the person that was leading. And that makes really difficult situation. And then you're stuck with them, so that if somebody comes along, you don't want to hurt feelings. And this is where good leadership comes in. And this is where, when you don't have all that great ability of leader, guy like me, I get out of the way and say, well, you know what, we'll struggle along until we can change it. Whereas a good leader, in all honesty, will step up and put the right people in leadership regardless. But it's hard to do that. It's a hard thing. You got to know how. You got to have those abilities. But see, that ability, that gift of leadership is where those things come in. So that's just kind of where some of those things are. All right? This individual will think in terms of creating positions for those that are potential. All right? The individual also likes responsibility, typically jumps at opportunities, takes charge of projects. A person who has leadership roles, even if it's big, little leadership, and you know, leadership roles don't always have to be huge leadership. Leadership over a group of 5, leadership over groups of 100, leadership over groups of 1,000. I'm just saying. So those people that are big on leadership are almost fearless. Something needs to be done, I'll do it. I'll do it. You know, that tends to be their attitude. I'm going to tell you, I'm just going to say this. And this is not done in a bragging way, but it was said in a way to help me realize what I'm supposed to do. But there was someone in our church, the only one that I guess in this crowd that would know him, maybe Cheryl might, but I know Butch would, it was a lady by the name of Alma Foley that was a member. She was a deacon, one of our deacons' wives. A godly woman, loved her. She meant a lot to me. And she was a part of the church I grew up in. And we was having a Christmas play, actually. We was at Christmas play practice. She always did our Christmas play. And we was, just sitting around waiting for practice to start. And I was sitting there, we was just chatting. And I was talking to her about some things. And I was saying, Alma, right now I kind of feel like my plate's full. I was a Sunday school director, teaching a Sunday school class, doing the bus ministry, the janitor of the church, faithful to visitation, came every work day. I was busy, and was busy besides. I was trying to go to school, and I was working my full-time job, and because I didn't always get all the funds I really kind of needed, I was working another job as well, third shift. So it was a battle keeping up, and I stayed tired, and I told her, I said, I really feel like I'm burning the candle at both ends, but I said, how do you say no? And she looked at me and smiled. She says, you can't say no because God has appointed you a leader. And I sat there and I just stunned, and I'm like, what do you mean? She says, you know that you're going to one day pastor. I said, no, I don't think so. Not me, not this guy. Yes, you. And that was kind of the gist of our conversation. And I thought about it and thought about it and thought about it, and I thought, everything God calls me to do is in those places where many times I'm just working for someone else, but it's typically a leadership role under someone else. And it helped me to realize some things that God was doing with my life. And I could see that he was molding me, making me what he needed me to be. It was because of some of the things that she told me that helped me to realize that. And so when we're talking about this gift of leadership, keep in mind, it's hard for that person to say no because they know their gift and they know they have the ability. When you look at a job and say, I can do that job, it's hard to say no because you know you're going to get it done. People ask me as a pastor, I'm a 64-year-old pastor, and yet I feel like when we do Vacation Bible School, I'm the guy that's always hands-on. And Butch beats me up over it. Barry, you got more things to be doing than Vacation Bible School. You know why? I know I can. It's hard for me to let it go because I know I'll get the job done. I know it. I'm positive. And it makes it really hard for a leader to let those things go, but that's a part of good leadership. In all reality, is giving it to the people that will do a good job, knowing who to give those things to and being a good administrator. And I'll be honest, I wrestle with the administration end of some of those things. All right? This person also tends to think in a very logical, problem-solving kind of a way. They don't panic, tend not to panic, deals pretty well with criticism unless it seems to hinder progress. Criticism is not a big deal unless you feel like it's hindering the work. And then when you feel like it's actually doing damage to the work, you tend to deal with it. And here's the dilemma. Because of that, we tend to be very passive, and then almost like something happened, like something snapped, we get very aggressive. And it tends to be that way. Maybe even blow up over some little stupid something. Because it's like we tend to see this and see that, and it's like, okay, no big deal. I'll handle it. Enough's enough. Shut up. Tends to work that way with leadership. We're very passive and can deal with almost any problem, but it can get to a place where you feel like it requires an aggressiveness to handle it. Look at Nehemiah. All those people mumbling and grumbling, the people on the outside that was doing all the work, and you never see him get upset until all of a sudden when he finds out that his people have this relationship with the guys outside trying to get them. And so you've got the relationship with your leadership inside along with the guy outside trying to attack you, and Nehemiah blows a cork. That's leadership. He gets very aggressive in how he deals with that then. All right? And so that's what leaders tend to do. Very logical, good problem solvers, and can deal with things, but there is a point where they can get very aggressive because they feel like you're doing real harm to the work that's being done. This individual is also usually protective of the people that they have placed in positions of leadership. They tend to work based on logic and facts with little regard to feelings. People with leadership role tend to, I'm not really worried about what you think about it. This is the facts. This is what we have to do. If we don't do this, it won't work. I'm sorry it hurt your feelings, but this is what has to be done. All right? Tend to be like that because we work on facts. In addition to that, they might be misunderstood in a lot of areas. One way is obviously the bossy, always wanting to be in charge. If I know that's my gift, I got to be real honest with you, probably going to be kind of that way, but I'll get the job done. All right? The people that have that leadership role will very often be hard to get along with and bossy, or seem to be that way. As long as you're doing it their way, they won't be. But now, if you try to buck them, it's just that deal. They know. They have that leadership ability. They'll also be looked upon as though they're playing favorites, when in reality, what they've done is chosen the people that they know can do the job. And it's not a matter of picking favorites. It's a matter of picking favorites. Because these are the people that can get the job done. All right? And so sometimes they'll be looked upon that way. They'll sometimes, finding, other people will not always be as adequate at doing things as they feel like they are. Sometimes, they can have a difficult time with that. And so what happens is they make sure they put people in jobs at the exclusion of others because they know they can work with them. Satan can attack in these areas. In a leadership role, obviously, you always have pride that's a factor. Satan can attack you and make you think you're the only one that can do it. Sometimes cause anger and mistreatment of those who buck the system. He can get in your head to where, quite frankly, those who don't like doing it the way you're doing it and don't like it done the way you feel like you've been called to do it, get frustrated with them because it's like, no, this is God's plan. This is the facts. This is what we have to do. And it's easy to get frustrated with people that buck the system and disagree with those plans and ideas because, quite frankly, I've always been of the impression if God calls you to a leadership role, then people ought to let you do the leadership role. If you don't think they got the leadership role, get rid of them, put somebody in that does. And so, people in a position of leadership, you have to feel like God must have called them in this, and so we're going to honor that. And so there is that don't buck the system. All right? That doesn't mean we can't make mistakes. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying. If you feel like they're people that are in God's will and they're in leadership, you need to follow the leadership. All right? They'll cause a lack of concern for people's feelings sometimes because they know what needs to be done. And sometimes it's like, we need to get this done. I'm sorry you don't like it, but this is the way it has to happen. Places of service are obviously any group leader, chairman of something, or even a church planter or something along those lines. All right, so those are the two that I'll talk about tonight. I'm already past time, but if you have a question, go ahead and ask it on leadership or thought. All right. Well, guys, there's 2 more down. All right, we got 3 down. Amen. There's only 433